Sorry.
So make it quick.
I will try my best, but we do have a lot to go over since it's our first look, but
Yes, it is. Yes,
I'll
we
do my best. I will say one thing, between Brian and Jeff, they work together a lot, and it's a blessing to have two directors that work so hard together to help each other, but also to anything that both those gentlemen do, it's for the betterment of students and staff, and they both care tremendously a lot about their staffs. They care a lot about Pennridge School District, and they are model people for Pennridge, and I am certainly as proud of them as you guys are. So I thank them both, from the bottom of my heart for what they do every day. So
Thanks, John.
we've been working together, looking at the fuel. As Brian and Jeff both talked about that, and we came up with an idea to look at the potential of a larger gasoline tank at the maintenance, or at the DSC, because Brian is starting to shift some of the buses away from diesel over to gasoline, especially the smaller ones. So when we look at the price differences between what we can get with the tank we have now or a larger bulk tank, it's like 30 cents a gallon difference. And when you multiply that out, that's a lot of money in a year. And in our initial look, we figured that we could probably pay for our project in about 3 to 4 years. And then from there on out, it's all savings. So the return on investment is pretty good. So one of the things that Jeff has asked Mike to look into is, can we do that? There's a ton of things that go along with that when you want to put a gas tank in, and there's I'm sure a ton and a half of red tape. But we have, that's why we have Mike to look at projects like that and to see what it's going to take in order to cut through that tape, that red tape, and so forth. So that's something that's on the drawing board. It's another way to try to figure out ways to lower our costs and continue to be more efficient. So, and these guys, the two of them are always doing that. Okay, so on slide 2 is the goals of this presentation. What I want to do with you is review the budget calendar, review the revenue to expense history, tell you what the Act 1 index tax rate is and what that impact means. Take a look at the 18-19 revenue and expenditure budget information, so where we're at as of right now. A fund balance review, what the retirement cost information is and what the history is, and define our path moving forward as we leave tonight and go forward in this budget process. The next slide is the Act 1 timeline. So back in October, we passed the resolution to avoid the Act 1 time process, and the resolution basically said we're not going to raise taxes any more than 2.4% this year. That's the index. We won't go over that, so then we didn't have to do the preliminary budget. Just a little note, that the economy is supposed to be getting better everywhere, right? So why did the Act 1 index go from 2.5 to 2.4? It was actually a reduction.
2-year lag.
What's that?
I thought it was calculated on a 2-year lag.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yep. There's bits and pieces of it from different years. But yeah, so it's a question. Why is it going backwards?
it's based on today.
Yeah. The next one is the budget timeline. So back January 5th is when all the department heads had to have their budgets into the system, into the accounting software, so that we could begin the process of reviewing them and having our meetings. January 19th was the deadline for the personnel budget to the first round of that to be done for us to start to review. Superintendent and myself and Amelia sat down with all the department heads, principals, and so forth, and we had our budget meetings from roughly January 16th through the beginning of February, and we went through all the budgets, and we'll talk about some of that. And then the next item we skipped because we avoided the Act 1 process. And then by January 26th was our deadline for that resolution. But again, we did that back in October. The next page, we skipped all these items because we didn't go through that Act 1 index. So we can skip right over those. Tonight, we're here at March 14th. This is our first look at the budget. The rest of those dates, again, are part of the Act 1 process, and we don't have to worry about those dates. So the next one, important dates here are April 11th. That's our next finance and budget meeting. We'll have a better look at the budget at that point in time. We'll have some better information as coming in from the retirements and so forth by then. After that, we have a May 2nd finance and budget meeting. Again, we'll go over the budget at that point. May 14th is the first voting meeting that you have to actually act on a budget, so keep that in mind. We'll come back on June 6th again and look at the budget, make any changes that we need to make. And then basically on the next slide, our final date is that June 18th voting meeting where we're going to hopefully vote on a final budget. If we don't do it that night, we're going to have to add meetings, and because we have to do it by June 30th. Okay, so that's kind of our time frame moving forward. The next slide, I want to just give you a little bit of general fund revenue and expenditure history. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but you can take a look at it. Just over time, you can see total revenues, total expenditures, what the excess or deficiency was in the year, and then what we did with the funds that were left over. For the most part, those funds were transferred to capital projects in order to fund the capital projects program, or they went to fund balance. For 16-17, that excess of $5 million was about a 3.7% swing between the revenues and expenditures. In 15-16, a lot of that had to do with a budget development process that happened during a time frame whenever both collective bargaining agreements in the district were not settled and weren't settled for quite a period of time. So for my predecessor, that would have been a very difficult time to try to build a budget that would have given the district enough of information and enough of just to make sure that she had things covered in case, because she had no idea what the settlements were going to be. So that would have been very difficult. The next slide is just the revenue to expenditure history, again shown on a bar graph. Next slide, I'm on number 11 now. This is the Act 1 index, the tax rate impact. So at our current millage rate of 135.255 mils, the median assessed property for homestead, farmstead, that tax bill for that particular property would be $4,176. This is a way to compare the impact of an increase. You could do it by an average, you could do it by anything, but with the homestead, farmstead, it always ties back to the median assessed value. So I use that as a way to compare. Again, the Act 1 index allows the 2.4% increase. You can see what that millage rate would be. It would be an additional 3.2 mils. And then on that median assessed property of $30,880, we're talking about an increase of about $103 if the index was put into place. And what would that generate? That would generate just short of $2 million of additional real estate revenue under our current assumption for assessed value. So, the very quick revenue to expenditure summary as far as the 16-17 actual, 17-18 budget, total revenues and total expenditures. Remember, our total expenditures exceeded revenues by about $337,000. And so where we're at right now with the development of this budget is total revenue of about $136.9 million and total expenditures of about $139.3 million, which is a deficit of $2.3 million expenditures over revenue. So that equates to about 1.72% increase in order to cover that, which we know that's larger than, I'm sorry, the 1.72% is the difference between the revenues and expenditures. That equates to about a 2.84% tax increase, which we know we can't go there because we can only go to 2.4. Okay, our limit to raise the revenue is 1.9 million, almost 2 million, and we're 2.3. So we know we have work to do because in order to, if we pass the budget right now the way it was, we could not raise enough real estate tax to make a balanced budget. So we have some work to do. The next slide just takes a look at what makes up those revenue totals. And again, we got the 16-17 actual, what we have this year budgeted, and then what we have budgeted at this point in our 18-19 numbers. And just to let you know that I do not have any real estate tax increase built into this, to the numbers I'm showing you here. Okay, this is what we're at right now without any tax increase. Local revenues is about 103 million, 75.4% of our budget. So we are very heavily reliant on local revenues in Pennridge. State revenue about 32 million, which is 24%. And when I show you a little bit later what that's made up of, a lot of that money is made up of the state's required reimbursement for Social Security and retirement. So I'll show you that. We have a little bit of federal money here, Title I, Title II, and so forth. It's a very small portion of the budget, and these are dollar for dollar grants from the federal government where you recognize the revenue when you spend the dollars. So again, total revenues are there, and you can compare them to the actuals and the current year's budget.
So you said that 130, almost 137 million number is without raising taxes, how much revenue we will take in?
That's what I have right now for budgeted for next year if we don't raise taxes.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm. And if we did raise taxes to the index, you'd increase that by just short of $2 million. Okay. The next one is I wanted to give you some detail of what that local revenue is. Current real estate and interim real estate taxes, by far the largest amount of our local revenues, $81 million out of $103 million. The next highest one is our Act 511 taxes. That's our earned income tax. The vast majority of that number is our earned income tax. You also have our taxes for real estate transfer tax. But again, the vast majority of that is the earned income tax. You have some delinquent taxes there, some revenue passed through the IU. That's for our IDEA B funds, but we have to show it as local revenue. We're showing a large increase in earnings on investments, showing interest rates are going up on both sides for borrowing and for investing, and we have a very good investment program here and through the school district liquid asset fund. So we're able to maximize those earnings, and it's time that we show that within the budget. So the rest of those are some more smaller local revenue lines, but again, that's major. What the major drivers are of the $103 million local revenue, and again that's about $2.6 million increase.
Where is that on there?
Earned income tax is under Act 511.
Okay.
John, can I ask you a
Can you
question?
go back and let me look at that, please?
Under the real estate current and interim,
Mhm.
okay, how real-time is the data from Bucks County on the number of properties within Pennridge? Are you basing it off that? I'm trying to get a feel for, there's a number of building projects that are in play and have been in play. And
Yeah, right now I'm building off of the current duplicate values that just came out with the township and county tax bills.
Okay,
So I have the most up to date.
perfect, thank you.
What number was that for?
The first line. The first line item, Ada.
The real estate, I'm
Real
sorry.
estate,
Got
yeah.
it, got it.
We're talking about the assessed value, so what we
Got it.
do is,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
we use the most up-to-date information that we have, and then we'll continue to get monthly updates from the assessment office, and then I'll do a, later on, around May, I'll update with the best numbers that we have at the time, and hopefully it'll be a little higher.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, so a little bit more information on that, Mr. Kraus, on the real estate tax collection. The assessed value we're using is about 637 million. It's up from 632 million that we used for 17-18's budget. That's about a 0.81% growth in that time frame. So hopefully we'll have some additional growth until we get to May, hopefully. And you can see, you know, what that drives out as a difference between 17-18 year-to-dates and the 18-19 budget number is about $500,000 of additional revenue.
What's driving the reduction in the collection rate?
What's that?
What's driving the reduction in the collection rate?
Well,
Every year it's going down just a little bit.
16-17 is the final actual, okay, it's the 97.35. The 17-18, right now, it dropped a little bit. But I don't know, I'm not sure exactly why, what drives, what, you know,
The
what.
economy's going.
Economy's supposed to be getting better. Again, though, that's just where we're at right now. We'll see how that finishes out the year. We've historically, the district budgeted 96%. The last 2 years, we increased that and we started budgeting at 96.5. You know, do we budget 96 3/4? Do we go to 97? How far do you
Risky.
how far do you start pushing that
Yeah.
that envelope? Where are you? You know, what's the line where you're trying to present a fair budget but not go over the limit and
Understand.
end up getting burnt? So
No. I'd rather be conservative.
it's a constant struggle in my mind where to go with that.
Okay.
The next one is the state revenue. The two largest state revenues are the basic education funding. That's the first line item. With the governor's budget, the initial calculations that we received showed Pennridge getting about $148,000 more. That will change. The calculations continue to change. The basic ed funding formula calls to be changed every time that the numbers that they used for the calculations change. So that's what we would get if they did the formula today. When they do the formula in June, when they start to figure out what they're going to pay us, that could be different. But for right now, that's the best number I have. Same thing with the special education funding. The governor's budget, our percentage of that would be about $111,000. Again, those numbers could change. Transportation, when Brian told you he shared with some reports with me tonight, he just gave me what the state sent us for the transportation funding for next year. So I'll take a look at that. That number may go up or down depending on what the transportation funding, what those numbers bear out. And when I told you about the Social Security and the retirement funding, you look there, retirement is about $10.4 million and another 2.3. So out of the $32 million of state funding, 12 of that is reimbursements for expenditures for Social Security and retirement, which is the state's responsibility. They're responsible for half that cost. So they have to give us that money. Okay? And those numbers, of course, are driven by salary. All right. Governor's budget address.
Sean, can I just quickly ask you a question?
Yep.
The BEF, did you say that number's based on not the increases that Wolf is proposing?
It is.
It is increased.
It is increased.
including-
It is proposed on Governor Wolf's increases. The problem is the funding formula changes throughout the year, and they don't set that in place until we get to the summer. because they don't have all the data in yet for the next year's funding formula.
Those code things.
So those numbers can go up and down, and we're also impacted by what other districts do. Because if we stay, if our, say our enrollment stays the same and our wealth factors stay the same in Pennridge, but somebody else's goes way down, well, that may drive more money to them.
Shift.
It may shift it.
Okay.
Someone else gets a lot of enrollment, shifts money to them in the formula.
Okay.
If we drop enrollment by a large number, we could see a reduction. So there's variables now that play, and you're no longer guaranteed what you got the year before. It used to be in Pennsylvania, you were always guaranteed what you got the year before, then you would get X amount more. That changed with the new funding formula. 3 years ago, they locked it into place as, okay, if you got 10 million now, you always get that 10 million. But from now on, any increase you get, every year that money goes back into the pot, it gets mixed up, and it drives you out a number. So we'll never be guaranteed anymore what we got before. So,
Which makes budgeting so easy.
yeah, it's great.
Thank
So,
you.
a couple things to take a look at here. The first line is the $100 million increase that he proposed in his budget. One thing to remember, $14 million comes off the top and goes straight to Erie School District because they're in a funding some type of funding crisis there. So that leaves $86 million for the rest of us. You take a big chunk of that $86 million and you send it to Philadelphia. After that, then they figure out what the rest of us are going to get. Okay? A few lines down, you'll see $20 million increase in special education. That's a line item that would drive money to the district here. Couple more lines down, you'll see pupil transportation is to be level funded. Well, the problem with that is everybody's pupil transportation costs are going up. They're not going down, they're not staying level funded. So, and transportation is driven out on the formula of all the costs. So if they're not putting any more money into it, that means that everybody's going to get a little less.
You get to absorb.
Yep, get to absorb. And then the last item is, the next one down is the retirement system. And he put, by law, they have to continue to fund that retirement system. So those are the major things that impact Pennridge. Now, there's other things on there that don't impact us, like pre-K counts. We did talk about VOTEC funding. There is a line item on here of $10 million for career and technical education. I'm not sure what the details of that's going to be yet, but that, in a nutshell, is the line items that will drive money out to the district. So the next one is state funding proposals that impact the district. You got the basic ed, about $185,000 increase. Ready to Learn block grant, they're going to level fund that again. Everybody will get the same thing they got before. And the special ed looks like about $53,000 more out of the formula for us. So, and again, those allocations will change. They not may, they will. They will for sure change. The next slide is the property tax relief. So this is the estimate of what I think the property tax relief, the homestead farmstead, will drive out next year, using the same number that we got this year, the $2.4 million. The number of approved homesteads is about 11,008. Another 123 farmsteads. Should work out to, roughly $201, $200. I think the year before that it was $199. So it's in that ballpark. It should be in that ballpark again. But we'll get more information in that in May, and we'll know how many homestead farmsteads we have. That information comes from the county, and then the state will tell us how much money they're going to give us for the property tax relief, and we'll do those calculations. And then one of the things that you vote on with the budget process is how much the homestead farmstead exemption is going to be. Okay. Federal revenue summary. Really just budgeting what we had in there last year. We don't know what these are going to be yet. And again, they end up being dollar for dollar programs. You get the dollar and you spend the dollar on the program. So are always our best guess on those of what we had the last year. The next slide, this is just a description of what the objects mean. Okay, when we go through this, you're going to see a lot of different objects. So I just want to put in here something, in case you're wondering what something was, gives you something to look back to and see what the different objects are, okay? So when we look at the budget, the expenditure side of the budget, there's two ways to look at it. You got your object totals, you got your major function totals. So our objects are our total salaries, our total benefits, and purchase services, supplies, so forth. When we look at the functions, we're looking at the total program cost. So we'll look at regular instruction, but we'll look at within regular instruction are all the object totals within that. So there's two different ways to look at the whole budgeting process. Okay, so this is the expenditure object summary. Again, the 18-19 grand total of $139.3 million. So what makes that up? The salaries and benefits are your biggest drivers within the budget. Your salary budget is $62.3 million. The benefit budget is $36.5 million. You can see the variance from the final budget in 17-18 to the 18-19 proposed budget. Wage salaries, this budget's up about $3.6 million. Benefits is up about $1.3 million. That benefit number is driven by that salary number. Okay. Purchase professional services is up about $900,000. This is directly a direct impact of the increases in the pupil services budget with special needs programs and so forth. We'll get into the detail of that budget next month when Sherry comes to talk to you. Purchase property services, we're down. 500 other purchase services. This one we're up considerably. There's an explanation why. The 500 has all your tuition accounts in it, and we actually changed the way we're accounting for a piece of the VOTEC cost. There's the tuition for the VOTEC, and there's the debt service for the VOTEC. We've always accounted for the debt service in the VOTEC of about $780,000 in our debt service. So we would have it down in the 800 and 900 objects. But the state told us we need to account for that as a tuition to the VOTEC. We have to add it to our tuition because the VOTEC then pays the debt and charges it to the debt service accounts. So they don't want us to charge it to the debt service accounts because then we should be showing that it was debt twice, but there's only one debt, okay? So we made that change. We fixed the budget, changed the budget process. So we pushed about $780,000 of expenditures up there. So really, of that 1.1 million, 780,000 is a transfer. The rest of that has to do with tuition increases to charter schools and placements and the different schools, like the schools that kids are placed in for either being in trouble or because of their disability or whatever reason, or cyber charter school or a brick and mortar charter school, whatever school they're going to, those costs go into the tuition account, which is that 500 object. So those are the two things that are driving that number. Supplies, we're down. Equipment, we're up a little bit. And again, the interest and the principal, we're down just because we moved the money, okay? So you can see here the major drivers and the major changes here in this budget for us to go from 133 to 139 million are the salaries and benefits and the professional services.
Sean, I have a question on the benefits. We implemented that deductible, and it doesn't seem to be having any positive impact for us. Is that correct?
It's having a huge positive impact for us.
It is? Then why doesn't it show here in the number?
It's being driven by the retirement number.
The benefit package?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
I will show you that in the next slide or two,
I'd like,
okay?
okay, thank
Yep.
you. Thank you to split that out. Thank you.
Yep. All right, next one is the increases in the salary. Again, $3.6 million. What's driving that? The current PA contract, the current year of the contract calls for a teacher's salary increase midway through the year. So we budgeted for half of that increase in the current year, because they're getting half of it this year, and we budget for the other half of that increase next year. All right, so the current contract, the way this it was structured for the mid-year increase calls for us to budget half of that increase next year. Okay, then we have a list of proposed new positions, which I'll go over with you, which I believe all those positions, if not all of them, most of them have been presented to you in various formats and ways by either Dr. Scheid or Diane Miller or Dr. Price. Then we also have our increases for our other contracts that are already in place, TASPA and the Act 93. And then we have an estimated increase in this budget for the ongoing PEA negotiations. Okay? So those are that's what's driving the salary. The next line, or the next page, is the requested positions for next year's budget. And you can see at the bottom of the second column, the salary, this is about $712,000 of that increase is driven by the new positions that are requested. The ESL is a required position based on the number of kids we have that need English as a second language. The .4 music is based on enrollment. We requested, through Dr. Price, requested an additional security officer. Now, we are going to have a meeting next week that may drive out a discussion, that may drive out a need for yet more. So we'll adjust that, okay, depending on where we go, where that discussion goes. But as of the time we put this together, we were at 1. An additional trainer or some form of a trainer is needed because our trainer cannot get to everything that he needs to get to. We have tried to bring in contracted trainers. Mrs. McHale has tried a number of different, to reach out to a number of different health organizations in our area to try to get substitute trainers, to try to get nurses to cover, to try to, we're just not having any luck getting people to go out and cover the events. So I put in a salary for another trainer. So that's a discussion that, that we need to continue to have. The rest of these, Mrs. Miller was here and talked about more technology support. I know that she's looking at different ideas based on that meeting. So the numbers I have here could change based on what comes from those. So those are adjustments we'll make as we go on. The rest of these numbers, the 1.4 at the high school, I think Mrs. DeBona presented that to you on the high school schedule. And the rest of these, the next few of these, the STEM teachers, the librarians, the world language, are based on the program improvement through Dr. Scheid. And then the 3 at the bottom are an autistic support teacher, a learning support teacher, and an autistic support teacher aide. And these are based on our enrollment in those programs, which we need to make sure that we follow the state laws for amount of kids per teacher. Yeah. So that's the new positions that we have at this point. These are included in the numbers that I'm showing you tonight. Okay. So just okay. So the 200 object or the benefits, I showed you that increased about $1.3 million, almost $1.4 million. What's driving that is the Social Security cost based on the wage increases, the retirement cost based on the increased rate from 32.5 to 33.43. We're mandated to make that increase. Every district in the state is. That number actually drove out about $250,000 of additional cost, which we get about half that back from the state. The retirement increase based on increased wages is about $750,000 of additional expenditures. And then all the other numbers within the benefit line items are driven out by the number of employees we have. So to look at that in a different way, if you look at the next slide, you can see each of the benefit line items and what the costs are that we have budgeted for next year. You can look at the retirement. That's the big driver, going from just over 19 million to just over 20 million. Social Security going up about 213,000. Again, they're driven by the rates and the wages. Okay, and the rest of the benefits that are up, it's based on the number of employees. We're budgeting more employees, and we're budgeting benefits for those employees, so those numbers are coming up. I do not have an increase in this budget for health benefits. We're budgeting same rates that we had last year, and we didn't raise them last year, so we're going to go in 2 years at the same rates.
Okay.
So yeah, those changes that we made a couple of years ago have had a very positive
Positive,
impact.
okay, thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. Object summaries, you can look at it on a pie graph. 71% of our costs are salaries and benefits, and the rest of the costs are spread out, pretty evenly among the other the budget categories. So I said about the two ways to look at it: the expenditures within the budget, the objects, and now these are the functions. So the functions are your different programs that you have. So your 1,100, that's your regular ed programs. Your 1,200 is your special ed programs. So each area that we have has its own function. And within that function, we have all the expenditures broke up into those object codes. So for the new board members, it's kind of a learning curve for you, but it's kind of the way it all kind of fits together like a puzzle. So I've given you the explanation of each of the functions that you'll see. So if you have any questions, you can take a look at that. Throwing everything on the ground. So we'll go to slide 30. So these are the functions, the expenditures by function. Thank you. 1,100 is your regular ed, 1,200 special ed programs, and 1,300 vocational programs. You can look at it this way, and you can see that is where the increases are coming from. They're coming from the educational programs. We're not increasing, Jeff's budget or Brian's budget. The money's going into the classroom, either in the regular ed or the special ed or the vocational ed. The money, and really the vocational ed is being driven by that transfer I told you about. So really, your increase in your expenditures are in your educational programs with the kids in the classroom. The $6.1 million increase is 98.6% of the total increase of this budget. Okay, and as we talked about, a lot of that's driven by salaries and benefits and the professional services, and that's all being driven out, by the cost to educate the kids. Okay. The support services part of the budget.
Can I just go back to, so the regular instruction, elementary and secondary, that's going up $3.7 million for 1 year? And can we get I think it's easy to lump that up and say, oh, well, this goes into the classrooms, but, we give each group an allowance basically of spending money. And each year they have to spend that money so they can justify an increase in that. And I keep hearing about all these resources that we're buying and throwing into the schools so that we can quick use that money and justify an increase in that money. And a lot of the stuff is not being used. And so I'm concerned when I see that number, is there a way of seeing at least a little bit of a breakdown on where those increases are going? Because I just don't want us to be spending more money where we don't have to. And yeah, I get, okay, yeah, this is going into the classroom, but if it's things they're not actually using, then it's not benefiting the kids. And the additional staffing that we're talking about adding, obviously that benefits the classrooms, right? So I think they all benefit the classrooms in different ways, but I would really like to see more of a breakdown of that number.
Okay, so when I showed you the object totals, I showed you salaries and the benefits going up. I showed you all the rest of the objects pretty much staying the same. And I'm going to go a little further here, and I'm going to show you a spreadsheet that Amelia put together that shows each of the budgets from each of the programs, each principal's and each department head's budget. And you're going to see there that those budgets are have very little increase in them, and most of them have decreases. So I'll show you that. And those are the objects from 300 on, all right? The 100 and 200, the salary and benefits, the principals, department heads don't control that. That's all driven out by the contracts. The contract's going to say what X teacher is going to make based on their degree and what step they're on. So we keep those separate. And the benefits driven out by that, the principal has no impact on it either. And that's either state mandated as a retirement cost, or it's mandated in the contract. So that's why we try to show you a separation between salary and benefits, and then the rest of it is what that principal or department head can actually budget for. So let me go a little further here and show you that, okay? Okay, so page 31 is your other support areas, and you can look at these budgets, and for the most part, these budgets are relatively flat. You got the transportation increase. We talked about that with Brian. A lot of that's driven by fuel. The maintenance department budget overall, that one is down, as Jeff showed you. But again, these numbers also have the salary and benefits within them, because these are the total functions or the total of each of these functions. Okay. The next page is the student activities and the community services. This one's down about $37,000, and then we look at our debt service and our transfers, our budgetary reserve. Our debt service, again, I'm showing you that as a decrease, but again, that's what's being moved up to. That VOTEC line item, the transfers, we're keeping the same, and the budgetary reserve is about $337,000, which is pretty close to what we have this year. So grand total of the budget, that's what by function totals makes up the total of the budget. So the next page will show you what 62% of the total budget expenditures are driven by the instructional functions, 20% by the support, about 9% for the debt service, which in comparison to other districts is not bad. Bad total of debt. There are many districts that are much higher than that. So the next page is what we were just talking about, the school department budgets. So this is each department's budget. The first the column with